Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is a Raabta exclusive. As you know, in the wake of COVID-19, we've moved our conversations digital, and it is really important to put some key insights out there. As you know, that it's very natural that in a crisis we are in a purely survival mode, and we're looking at an immediate survival strategy only. But could that mean that we are too focused and we are going to win the battle, but perhaps lose the war? That's exactly the concept and the thinking behind putting these conversations together. We'll have corporate leaders, we'll have leaders from all spheres of life presenting how they're reading COVID-19 and the present pandemic crisis. Today we have amongst us a very prominent member of the corporate fraternity from Pakistan. We have with us Mr. Shazad Dada, the CEO of Standard Chartered Pakistan, and also the president of OICCI. Assalamu alaikum, Shazad. Thank you so much for joining me today. So this crisis, it's really pushing our buttons, and we've never seen something like this before. How are you reacting on a more personal as well as organizational level?
Thank you, Sidra. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Really an honor to be here, and obviously with the panelists that you have lined up. And let's see how this digital experience happens. But look, I think, as you said in your intro, this is one of the biggest pandemics that we have seen ever. And I think the impact of this is very deep and very broad. The question is, everybody's been impacted, both at a personal level and at a professional level and a local level, global level. So the challenges that we are going to face coming out of this are huge. I mean, $20 trillion, $250 billion of the global economy is getting impacted. If you look at 500 million people are going to go below poverty line from this pandemic alone, leave alone the people that were already on the poverty line. And different experts are talking about how we're going to come out of it. Frankly, nobody knows the answer. But clearly, I think that our view is either it's going to be a U-shaped recovery. Some are talking about a W-shaped recovery, and obviously the worst case scenario is it could be an L-shaped recovery. But I think what we all as professionals and as human beings really need to think about how to react in this environment. And I think this is really going to be a challenge for everybody involved, how we do it. But the recovery will depend on how we reposition ourselves and how we produce and be more human about this, and how we go about this whole episode. I think a good example in every recovery, there have been many recoveries. The big difference in this crisis is there's a supply side shock and a demand side shock. Typically, it's a one-sided shock, and you're able to come out of it. But this one clearly has both sides, and one has to manage both ends of it. But if I look back in history, Lisbon is a very good example. 1755, it was devastated. But again, there was a lot of interventions taking place, and it gave rebirth and renewal to a country which is now doing phenomenally well. So I think there's hope at the end of the tunnel. How we come out of it and how we rebuild will really depend, in my opinion, in 4 factors. The first will be the industrial structure of each country, how equipped and how well prepared they are to really be able to change gears, look inwardly, produce things that they've never been able to produce. Do they have the labor force? Do they have the know-how? Do they have the raw materials and all of that? The second will be the shape of the corporate structure, how widespread this is and how effective that can be. And I think there the question is, if you look at the US, the numbers are quite staggering. What you've seen there is that's a country which I was reading somewhere that 250 million small American firms will not survive, don't have enough cash to survive a month. This was a study done by Harvard and University of Chicago. And clearly, I think the more of your firms that are in the small SME sector, what we call it, are the ones that are most at risk. Larger companies do have the buffers, do have the cash flows, do have the management depth and structures in place. I think that's a challenge, and it's a challenge for us also. So I think that will be the third most important point. And the last will, in my opinion, for the countries will be self-sufficiencies. How many of them have food security? Pakistan in that sense is blessed because 70 or over 70%, 75% we are self-sufficient. So I think these will be the very important elements of how we do it. And clearly the countries that can really be agile, be able to adapt, and be able to take advantage of some of the trends. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the think will come out of this crisis, because every crisis, and you can go back in time, there is what you see is you move forward and prosperity comes. Look at 2008. It was one of the worst crises we had, though again, it was not both demand and supply, and it was a very different time. But what we saw after that, after lots of interventions and some pain from 2008 to 2011, 10, 11, I think there was prosperity right after that. So I'm quite hopeful about that. And I think we should be able to, if we can manage this period well, I think the countries who can really rely on those four pillars, I think will do well. Second part, I think, is how will the national borders react, right? How inward looking or how outward looking, and will we see border tightening, nationalist view versus a more regional or more global view? And I think that's something to see. But one lesson, I think, and talking to a lot of our global clients, in fact, this morning I had a long chat with one of the top retailers, and what we are finding is they've realized the supply side diversification need, closer to the supply chain, creating that space, diversifying, not having all your eggs in one basket. That's the diversification theory. You hear about it a lot. But I think what they've learned is by over dependency in one country or one supplier can be very damaging if something like this happens. So we'll see how it goes. But clearly, I think this is there's a lot in the mix right now, and I think it's all about how we adapt and prepare ourselves.
There is indeed that element of surprise and shock, and almost this catching us at a time when we were perhaps very ill prepared. But I do want to understand where you pointed out to the borders perhaps tightening up. A very good read that comes to mind is a book named Anti-Fragile, and it talks about things that actually gain out of the disorder. Do you feel that Pakistan, with all its structural problems, institutional problems, all our disadvantages, are we perhaps any one of these disadvantages can actually become an advantage at a time like this for us?
Honestly, I know when I talk about this, I've had some chats with friends, with family, and these days you're having a lot of those because you're spending a lot of time with them. I personally think if we get this thing right, I think it's a huge opportunity. I'm not undermining pain, which a lot of everybody is going through. And we are in the midst of that, working with a number of clients, both from my Standard Chartered platform or OICCI platform, and talking to a lot of stakeholders across the board. But I think companies that can really come out of this will be very well positioned. And I think Pakistan, one, because of its strategic, geostrategic positioning where we are. Don't forget the whole CPEC element. And I think in the midst of all of this, nobody's talking about that as much. But again, there could be a huge opportunity and a huge place for us to take advantage of that. I think coupled with a young population, coupled with the fact that we have this displacement is helping us on our current account deficit challenges, which have been lingering on. I think this is a perfect time to rethink about some of our broader issues. Some of those discussions have already started in terms of the imbalances that we have had in terms of cost of doing business. So I think honestly, and suppliers are diversifying and they are saying we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And one of the criticisms that we had prior to coming into this pandemic was we were too insulated. We were not doing enough trade. Exports to GDP ratio is very low. Our leverage relatively is low. So I think a lot of people in Pakistan, for example, home ownership, most of our home ownership is on an unlevered basis because mortgage industry here has not really kicked off. 70 to 80,000 households the kind is minuscule. It's less than 1% of the compared to our neighbors, for example, which are sitting at around 12%. So I think there's because of that insulation and because of those just things which we thought were disadvantages are going to really position us well as an advantage, and we will be the one who can benefit a lot. But for that, we need to be agile, we need to be quick, we need to adapt, and a lot of lessons are going to be learned. And the best companies or the best countries will be the ones who can learn from these experiences and really get up and move forward. And I really believe that this is in a way, a golden opportunity for us to rethink, recalibrate, reposition, and be able to really go out there and take advantage of the situation not in a negative way, but in a positive.
So yeah, I go back to your earlier comment where you said that this is for the first time that we've hit on both sides. It's the supply side as well as the demand side that is facing a challenge. Will that change the way we used to do business globally? I mean, till about a year back, 2 years back, even in 2018, the world was kind of celebrating the cyclical high when not just the developing world but the developed countries as well, we were all at an all-time high. Now suddenly it's a recession and we are far more integrated, we are far more dependent on each other. So is this the end of globalization as we knew it?
Look, that's a tall that's a tall question, tall reach in terms of saying end of globalization. I'm a student of economics. I'm a student of Adam Smith, and the theory of self-interest will always prevail. I think trade is something that we have done for centuries, continue to do it. Globalization will happen, but I think during this period, 25 million trillion is traded across the borders, and only if you agree. There, short term, there's been a massive reduction. There's a reduction in numbers quite seriously. But I think in the medium and long term, I think that's going to come back up. How we trade, who we choose our partners, what we do, will all depend on how this next 6 to 9 months would happen. I think you need interconnectivity, and there's interdependencies of workers. And I think that's the theory, again, referring back to Adam Smith. And we will bounce back. And again, I don't want to go too far back. 2009 is a good example where I think after a very, very serious financial crisis that we all went. But keep one thing in mind: trade thrives on trust and predictability, and that is something both we are right now in there's a big shortage of that. Predictability will only come when we get the vaccine. And trust is again something that has been shattered. And everybody has become very guarded, very regionalized, or very nationalist in their view. I mean, we just saw the US coming out with, for example, immigration policy, stopping that. And so I think there has to be, and we really need to think through it. But I'm a firm believer. The way we trade, how we trade, the cost of trade has gone up. For example, right now, cargoes, which typically were sort of piggybacking off passenger transportation, their cost has gone up significantly. And I think that's gone up only because there's no passenger planes flying. So if that becomes it, the math doesn't stack up, and you will then look for neighboring countries, or you look for cheaper ways. And maybe local production will become more cheaper than when you add in the transportation cost and so forth. But I think we'll go back to trade in the way we know it. However, the shape and curve of that trade, how we do it and who we do it with, will change. And again, going back to your earlier question, if Pakistan can be a big beneficiary, given our strategic location and where we sit today, can really take advantage of that. But we'll need to be agile, and we really need to be ready to take advantage of as the opportunities open up.
So Shazad, building on this agility, the need to be agile by the businesses, do you feel that they're already going back to the drawing board across the board, whether you are a large scale manufacturing unit or a small or medium sized firm? People are now thinking how perhaps the profits would be lower, but you would need more stability in business, more security nets, the ability to survive periods like that. Because just like you pointed out, till the vaccine comes out, there is a possibility that we'll probably have, a cyclical shutdown, lockdown, confinement coming time and again. So our business is already thinking that perhaps how will they have more stability, more security in the way they operate?
No, exactly. I think in the short term, look, survival is the name of the game. Everybody's talking about that. First, personal health, and then obviously of their businesses before they talk about how they can help others, how they can help the neighboring companies, and so forth and so forth. And I think stability, as we talked about, vaccine will play a very pivotal role. I think right now a lot of businesses are talking about how do we get back into our offices and how do we get some of the orders placed. But clearly, I think a lot of this has made people think about agile and future-centric models. I'll tell you about our business banking. We had been investing in our view was that everything will be in your on your palm, and you'll be able to really do any bank anytime, anywhere, any place using your mobiles or other modes that are in the works. And I think that's really paid off, because right now in my head office where I'm sitting, 90% of my staff is not here. Everybody's working from home. Obviously, our branches are open, and some of our physical spaces have to be occupied, like call centers with employees. But we have pretty much adapted very well. Our clients are doing their businesses, trade, the ones that are open, and it's happening very seamless and smoothly. But it's made us think also, do we really need all this real estate, for example? Do we really need to make sure that everybody comes to work, some of them coming, driving or taking public transportation for an hour and a half, and going back, and the kind of loss of productivity during that time? And what we've seen is we are getting a lot of productivity out of our people, because they really are saving on all of that. And the stress, we all know the traffic stress and everything else. So I think there's going to be a lot of recollaboration, rethinking how we can be more productive, more effective. And again, the model will change from fixed cost to variable cost. And there will be shift of that. And as that happens, there will be some industries that will boom and some industries that will be challenged. Taking my real estate example, I think office space, again, distance learning, education, how we are doing it. A lot of our children are doing online courses, how that's going on, how to do it. Do we really need those big infrastructures? So I think in that sense, lower profits will happen, but post that phase, the ones that are agile and that the ones that have invested in the digital in the landscape and able to really take advantage of it, I think they will be the ones. If you look at, I'll give you an example. Retail sales last month globally have down 8.7%. In the midst of all of that, Amazon has hired over 100,000 new jobs, and they are really growing. There are lots of companies and lots of examples, even across the border. If you look at some of these online companies, in the midst of one of the highest unemployment data that's coming out across the globe, there are companies that are hiring and hiring big. So I think what's going to happen is there will be models that will have to be rethought through, recalibrated. Some sectors that will do phenomenally well, like online, like healthcare. Some models, some industries, and some will be challenged, whether it's tourism or till the vaccine is not there. So I'm quite travel industry, yeah. And I think the value chains, the operating models, how do we foster those and how do we connect those will become an important one. I think during the
opening up the canvas a little more. What does this mean for governments and states? Like you very rightly pointed out that some will benefit, some will be more agile, so they'll probably prop themselves better and lay the foundation for it. But just like Prime Minister Imran Khan has been talking about how developing countries, the countries which are already pressured and pressed, they don't have the fiscal space. What does this mean for democracies? Do you feel, and there was a report recently that came out of the World Bank cautioning that the South Asian economies may be hurt and maybe hit worse than the other parts of the world. So how do you think, the systems, there'll be more failed states? How will the governments and the states, get that fiscal space for themselves?
Yeah, no, and you're referring to, and it's a very daunting claim that, we will become the epicenter of this whole pandemic, South Asia, that is. And clearly, I think this is where governments will have to really find a fine balance, saving lives or saving economies. And again, we don't have the fiscal space. So one size doesn't fit all. What worked in one market doesn't work here. We have other challenges. But then, like I said, there are other opportunities that we have. And there's no right or wrong strategy. But I think this is a time that we all as a nation need to come together and collaborate and cooperate and really look at, we can always do Monday back quarterbacking. Decisions can be debated. Intentions can be second guessed. We cannot be here while governments will be exposed to structural deficiencies, inefficiencies that maybe their capacity and capability issue. But you cannot call that a failed state. I think there is obviously regionalization or provisionalization taking place. But I think if I just look at democracies and I look at some of the best democracies or the oldest democracies, they are also facing a lot of challenges. So I wouldn't say democracies will be, the whole democratic system will get questioned. Some state enterprise governments and better other models. So there's no one size fit all, but I don't think it will
But
create
Shazad, if
failed
I
state.
may interject, people are asking very difficult questions and different questions. Like our whole politics used to be, the whole electoral process, the way people would perceive political issues was very different. Now, what this COVID-19 crisis has done is it has put healthcare in the center of all issues. It has put pollution and education and all the structural reforms. I mean, the crisis did not give us a space to sort of react. If we were better prepared, if things were working smoothly, some places had an advantage. So my last question to you would be exactly that. Do you feel that COVID-19, amongst other things, has also changed the way politics will be within states and between states? Because we see a lot of finger pointing happening, but nobody really has a solution. The developed world does not have an advantage over the developing countries, so to say. So do you feel that politics has also forever been changed?
I think politics has definitely changed, and I think I'm not a political expert, but I can just tell you one thing. I think the way people are thinking, to exactly to your point about the fact that our healthcare system is broken, and I think issues like climate change and education, these will become paramount importance, and people will not have to look back decades or centuries to say, oh my God, if we did not have it, they'll say, I've been through it. So I want to have leadership. I want parties that can give us that comfort that they are protecting the future generations to come. So questions about taking on incremental debt and wasting it on non-essential items, and how we spend our money, what are we importing, and what are we really doing with that hard-earned foreign exchange? Are we doing getting apples from New Zealand, or are we doing something else with it? And I think these will be the questions that I think will be put out. And I think the leadership, or the political leadership, that can demonstrate that they really care and they are able to really navigate despite very tight fiscal space, I think will be the ones that will, sorry, those will be the ones to do it. And I think strong leadership with humility will be acknowledged. I also feel that, you know, as this happens, one will really have to look at how do you balance. And I think this is a very tricky one. It's very easy to criticize. It's a very tricky one, especially for our patch, where you save lives, or you have deaths because of hunger. And I think that balancing will be very important. One other point that I just sort of not directly related to this, but I just wanted to, going back to the opportunity, Siddha, if I could, is about
Yes.
this whole digital net. And I think going back to the opportunity, I think this is again, for Pakistan's context, what we have seen is, among all the crises that we've had, and we have our fair share of, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's floods, whether it's wars, and many more, financial crisis. I think this is the one, it's a supply side, demand side, but this is the one where the more impacted is the informal sector rather than the formal sector. And the problem here is that normally when it's the formal sector, the informal sector always carries us through. And we ask for explanations, we bring experts in, and we ask what happened, how did we come out, and everybody says we don't know. But the black box is the informal sector is so vibrant that carried it, and that explains the fact that the streets are buzzing and economy is running because the informal sector made sure everybody is kept employed. This time around, I think it's the informal sector that is being hurt the most, and that's where we have the biggest employment. And that's the one that's not in the net. So all the efforts the government is doing, and a lot of good things have happened by the government and by the state bank, I think, again, by the nature of it, are addressing to people who are documented. And because we have a large undocumented sort of economy, I think those people cannot come through. But I think this is a perfect opportunity to use the digital leapfrog and really connect everybody, connect our supply ecosystem, and really get everybody. And once we get that, when we come out of this crisis, inshallah, I'm confident we will come out of it. I think we will have a very connected ecosystem, and it will also address some of our perennial issues, which is tax to GDP and many other challenges. So I'm really confident that if we, and with prudent leadership, with good collaboration between province and federation, with proper guidance by our clergies, and right, we balance it, learn from everybody around us. I think this could really be a turnaround opportunity for Pakistan.
Absolutely, Shazad. I think I'll echo the same sentiment. And you're right, we're at ground zero. Whatever we build right now will have effectiveness and productivity and functionality for us even beyond the crisis. But my last few things for you would be, is there a particular quote that keeps you inspired during these hard times? Because you yourself, in your personal capacity, are a corporate leader, and I'm sure when you have this data, this unfiltered data, and the loom and gloom projections coming to you, it must be taking a toll. So what keeps you going?
No, what I mean, like a quote is not coming to my mind, but all I can say is I'm a glass half full kind of a guy. I'm an optimist, and I really see a lot of hope, a lot of opportunity. I also feel that this is a time for corporate leaders to step up, provide that hope, not false hope, but provide the hope to our people and be seen out there, so that we can really rally the troops at all levels, at a personal level, at a corporate level, at a federal level. And I see some great examples of great leaders, and leaders, really true leaders, are the ones who really step up during crisis. In good time, you don't differentiate, but this is the time. So my hope is that we see more leaders step up, and we have such a young population, and we see some great examples of what people are doing. So I'm really proud of being, seeing the Pakistanism in our people, and it really makes me proud and hopeful.
People have always stepped up whenever it's been a national challenge, and this is a global challenge. I'm sure Pakistanis and young Pakistanis will not disappoint us. Thank you so much, Shazad, for taking out time and being a part of this conversation. Some very key messages needed to go out for people to sort of make sense of this pandemic and what to expect in the days to come. And you've definitely given us a very realistic dose of optimism. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Siddha. Good luck. Bye.
Thank you.